Hey, good morning. I'm Paige Browning. It's Wednesday. This is Seattle Now. When you think of data centers in Washington state, you probably think of those in rural areas, outside small towns like Quincy and Prosser. But as demand grows for more data centers, companies are looking to the city. Some have started to request space in Seattle. We'll hear more from Seattle Times climate reporter Greg Kim in a minute. But first, let's get you caught up. Welcome to Tax Day, the due date for filing nationwide, but residents in many Washington counties get 2 more weeks, including locally in King, Pierce, and Snohomish counties, because the IRS gave an extension to May 1st, since so much of the area is in recovery from December's major floods. The agency says it will identify those taxpayers so you don't have to apply for an extension. Summer is often called construction season. Not this year. The city of Seattle says it's pausing construction in busy areas of the city for about a month this summer during the FIFA Men's World Cup. The temporary work stoppage applies to downtown, South Lake Union, SoDo, and most major arterials, and it'll last from June 8th to July 7th. City officials say it's to create space for transit and cyclists and pedestrians on sidewalks. And today, road crews near Mount St. Helens will start rebuilding a bridge that was wiped out by a landslide 3 years ago. It destroyed the Spirit Lake Outlet Bridge on State Route 504 and blocked the road that leads to the Johnston Ridge Observatory. State officials say they hope to finish the rebuild by the fall, but the Washington State Standard reports the observatory will stay closed until next year. We'll be back with more headlines on tonight's episode of Seattle Now. The data center train has left the building. Tech companies have come in and plopped data centers in farm country and in small cities across America, many of whom didn't want them in their town. Protesters have railed against the facilities, claiming they're getting larger energy bills and depleted water supplies now. Next stop, Seattle? Washington state's already home to more than 100 data centers, powering artificial intelligence and cloud computing. But now, 4 companies have approached Seattle City Light about building them within the city. Seattle Times climate reporter Greg Kim has been reporting on this, and he's here to tell us more. Hey, Greg, thanks for being here.
Hi, Paige. Thanks for having me.
So this whole conversation isn't really about data, Greg. It's about power. And I mean electrical power, although probably other power as well. In Seattle, how do we get our energy?
Yeah, Seattle's pretty unique in that we get the vast majority of our power from hydropower. And Seattle had the foresight to build its own dams on the Skagit and Pend Oreille rivers. And so we get about 40% of our power specifically from city-owned dams, and the rest we buy from federal hydropower dams at a pretty cheap price.
Where do things stand with our supply?
We usually have more power than the city of Seattle uses, but with the low snowpack in recent years, that means we've had less hydropower. And as the city's demand for electricity grows from electric vehicles, heat pumps, more adopted air conditioning, the city is forecasting it will need to nearly double its maximum electricity supply by 2033. So
Holy
it's
cow.
already looking at needing to add a lot more electricity than we already have.
Here I thought this was a story about data centers, and then really it's a story about energy, and then really it's a story about snowpack. They're all related.
They're all related.
Do we have data centers in Seattle right now?
We do. Actually, the Seattle Times is occupying a building that has a data center in it, which gives you kind of a scale for how big the data centers that are in the city currently are. There are 30 data centers in the city right now. And like I said, they're kind of small. The ones that are proposed, the 5, could use nearly 10 times as much electricity as all existing 30 put together. So these ones that we're talking about are way bigger than the ones that have been in the city for a while.
I just have to pause to think about that scale. If we get these 5 big ones, they're going to require 10 times as much energy. as the 30 small ones that exist.
Yeah, that's based off of like how much they could use at maximum. The city's utility notes that they usually won't use that much, but that is how much they could use. Yeah.
Okay. Now, I feel like I'm always hearing about data centers popping up in more rural areas. Amazon, for example, is looking at some farmland right now along the Columbia River. Why are companies thinking about Seattle, an urban city?
Yeah, we don't know exactly why these data centers are wanting to come to Seattle because City Light says they can't tell us who these companies are due to non-disclosure agreements. But when you talk to analysts, what they say is that data centers are running out of power basically everywhere. So like you said, in the past, they used to target areas where land was cheap and power was cheap. But because of this data center build out happening all over the country and all over the world, frankly, due to companies wanting to scale up artificial intelligence, they're running out of power nearly everywhere in the country. And so they are looking at areas that would have previously not been attractive to them because of land costs, for example, but they're checking them out to see if, hey, would they let us hook up and access power here?
Now, this is going to mean Seattle City Light giving them power. What did City Light tell you about how large data centers could impact our power grid, sometimes an overly taxed power grid?
Yeah, officials at the utility were pretty frank in saying that if these data centers get hooked up to the city's grid, that would impact the utility's ability to serve its existing customers and the growth in demand that its existing customers are already forecast to have. What they're doing right now is rewriting the terms of contracts for these large, huge customers like these data centers to make sure that existing customers won't be impacted. They're still in the process of rewriting those terms, but what they're looking at doing is getting them to pay for the electrical grid infrastructure upgrades that they'll need, and also to bring in their own power from somewhere else so that they're not taking up the city's own limited supply.
This is not like a small business trying to hook up to Seattle City Light. They're saying you can't just hook up to us. You need to bring your own power. This is proposed, at least.
Right.
Wow.
It would need to go through the mayor's office, but that's what's being talked about right now.
Okay, so Seattle City Light's trying to set the bar higher for major data centers. Is it feasible the companies would actually get to build here?
Yeah, that's a good question. It is difficult to bring your own power. A lot of data centers are bringing their own power in other places. In some cases, those are fossil fuel power plants located right next to data centers.
Which Seattle just loves.
Yeah, that would be probably politically less feasible here. When I talk to the city utility, what they're saying is they want them to bring clean power that can power their data centers for all the hours that they need power. That's pretty hard to do with wind and solar power, which are variable depending on the conditions. And so if the city goes through with what officials talked about with me, wanting the data centers to bring all of their own clean power, that's pretty difficult to do without hydropower.
Can Seattle City Light just veto these? Say, no, we're not allowing the data center because they might use a lot of power.
The short answer is no. It's not like the city utility can look at each project and decide whether it wants to take it on as a customer. If each project meets the set of criteria or rules that it is required to follow, then the city's utility is required to serve it. And so that's what they're doing with this set of new conditions for these huge customers, and raising the bar for them to make sure they don't impact existing customers. That's what they're doing in terms of making sure that those conditions won't harm existing customers.
So, we're hearing some reasons why Seattle might not want a massive data center. But how would Seattle benefit in this situation? Could the city benefit? Well, what do these data centers bring to the table?
The main benefits of data centers are property taxes. These are huge projects that can cost billions of dollars, and the property taxes on that can amount to millions of dollars, which is not nothing. And I'm sure your listeners are also aware that the jobs created in data centers long term after they're constructed are not that many, probably in the range of dozens per data center. But, those are jobs that otherwise wouldn't have been there. Proximity to data centers is another thing that these companies are looking at. The closer you are to data centers, the faster that information comes back. And so that's one reason that they might want to add them to urban areas. And that's another potential benefit for people in those urban areas.
Greg, what are you going to be looking for in the near future with this story?
I'm really curious to see how these conditions that the city's utility is currently working on shakes out, and whether these data centers that have asked to come into the city actually do make it through those sets of conditions. If they do bring their power, where that will come from, how clean it will be, and who these companies are. Those are all questions that I have for this.
Seattle Times climate reporter Greg Kim, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thanks for having me, Paige.
Thanks for listening to Seattle Now. This show is made by our team here, but also by input and support from you. We're always looking to improve our show, and we do that by listening to you, our listeners, our friends, our mighty Seattle Now community. If you'd be up for participating in a focus group for the show, fill out the survey in the show notes today. We'll get in touch. Thanks as always to our generous donors for all your support. We're not a data center, but we sure could use your energy to rate and review the show today on your podcast app. We love hearing from you and seeing your reviews. Today's episode was produced by Vaughn Jones. It was edited by Caroline Chamberlain Gomez. Our production team also includes Andy Hurst, Brooklyn Jamerson Flowers, and Patricia Murphy. Greg Kramer does our theme music. Seattle Now and KUOW Public Radio are members of the NPR network. I'm Paige Browning. See you tonight for Evening Headlines.